We'll call the meeting to order, and we'll begin with the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Itnyer.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, public comment on closed session. Would anybody like to comment on any closed session items? Okay, not seeing any. We will adjourn to closed session. We're going to reconvene in open session, and we'll begin with a report from closed session.
Thank you, Chair. The board met in closed session on the two items on the agenda, and there's nothing to report.
Thank you. Next up is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And finally, roll call.
Chairman Peters,
Here.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Present.
Director Griffin,
Here.
Director Vallejo,
Present.
Director Itnyer.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Next is item 6, which is public comment. This item is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on this agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person.
Good morning. My name is Judy Decker. I wish to comment on a letter that appeared in the newspapers almost 2 months ago from the people who signed it. Said they were community leaders, and they were criticizing this board extensively. And the issues they brought up, it was obvious that those people had not read the documents that you have on your website. They have not followed the water issues. And so I don't know if Carol is listening, but as vice chairman of the then Policy Advisory Committee, we created for you a community and engagement plan. And while you have improved, you've improved the website and there's more on it, I believe it's time for someone designated by this board to become a speaker and go speak at such organizations as the Chamber of Commerce, the Board of Realtors, and Rotary Club, etc. People do not know what is happening with water in our valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Sophia Merck. I live in this community and have lived in this community for a long time. The last meeting I tried to attend here was not held anywhere close to 11 o'clock. I have been dropped 3 times from notifications in regards to the meetings, and I think everybody sitting on this council, this board, should show a little bit more respect to the people that you are representing. And I think Judy's idea about going around to different communities and speaking to different organizations would be prudent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Could I ask a question, just clarifying real quick? You said that you had been dropped from from notifications. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. You weren't receiving notifications about the meeting?
For the last month, yes,
Okay. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. We'll look into that. Thank you.
yes. But I have been involved since 2014, when I served as president for the Eastern Current. And it's pretty sad when the community, and I know what Judy's talking about, there's a lot of people that don't understand, but they need to understand from you, and they need personal, not Facebook. They need to put a face to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to make a quick suggestion that sometimes my emails will go to your spam folders, so I would check there, but I will send you a test email and see if that goes through, and I'll call you after just to make sure. Okay.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Okay, seeing none on the floor, we'll go to the phones. Go ahead, caller. Caller, go ahead.
Oh, hello. My name is Peter. I was admitted to the Ridgecrest Hospital about a month ago. Do you need my patient number?
What did you say? I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Thinks he's calling the hospital.
Oh, I said my name is Peter. I was admitted to the hospital about a month ago, and I was asking if you need my patient number.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think you may be calling the wrong line. This is the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority.
Oh. Is this 760-699-3010?
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I would Google Ridgecrest Regional Hospital because this number that you've called is incorrect.
The hospital number is
Yeah, I made a typo. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Just in case he's listening, Chuck, do you have that number?
I
off the
do.
top of
It's
your head?
760-446-3551.
All right, thank you, sir. Next caller, please.
Yes, and this is Mike Neal. I'd like to make some comments on the recent resolution of the Water District concerning the pipeline. Just going to address a few points in that there were 16 total, so there's a lot to be said about it. The most pertinent ones are, and the first point in the resolution says, cost of the authority pipeline is about $300 million as opposed to the $200 million estimated by the authority. This is based on the cost analysis prepared by Clean Energy Capital. Included and above and beyond that is operations and maintenance. That's going to be $8 to $10 million per year. They also threw out a cost analysis about what that's going to potentially cost everybody in the valley. That's not included in the resolution, but it's a lot. It shocks people when I tell them what it is. Continuing on with points in the resolution, this is point number 10 in the resolution. Authority justification for the pipeline is based on the premise of 7650 acre-feet per water of recharge. However, they formed a technical working group and had 4 to 6 different studies done looking at this. The technical working group estimates that there's going to be 14,000 acre-feet per year, and the usable groundwater and storage is over 30 million acre-feet. That seems like a whole lot more than we've been led to believe by the authority for quite some time. Surprise. Point number 14 on the resolution. The district believes it is in the best interest of the community and district customers to stop work on the authority pipeline until there is a final court determination on safe yield. The district believes the authority has failed to adequately investigate alternatives to the authority pipeline. I agree wholeheartedly with all those conclusions. And in simple terms, I would just like to say, as far as the proposed pipeline by the Groundwater Authority goes, it will cripple the Indian Wells Valley economy. It simply costs too much for people to bear. And on top of that, and even worse, is we don't even need it. If these such studies in the kind of 13,000 acre feet plus of acre feet recharge with a little more conservation of simple means, such as eliminating a lot of grass in people's front yards around the valley, we would have all the water that we needed. We wouldn't have all this huge extra cost. So I believe that noted recently is the authority has not really responded to such and not responded or even made comments on the study's results or anything else as expected. But that's what the facts are. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other callers on the phone?
Hi. Yes, I'd like to make a public comment.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, is the board going to hear, or how does this work?
Yes, the board can hear you. Could you just give us your name and go ahead and make your comment?
Okay, my name is Carol Wilson, and this is a partial critique of the article in the Daily Independent 2024 edition entitled "Who We Are: The Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority Protecting the Future of the Indian Wells Valley." It was falsely stated that our valley has been critically overdrafted for 6 decades. This designation has only been recently changed from overdrafted at the request of the GA so they could get grant money to begin the pipeline design. Yes, the pipeline has been the plan from the very beginning. This is and has been a major deception on the part of the GA. Secondly, our basin is not closed. It leaks into Trona and Cal City and possibly all the way to Palmdale. So this means that if the pipeline comes to fruition, it will be pumping some of our very own water back to the IWB. This doesn't make any sense. While it is true that the Navy base depends on groundwater, their mission will always be supplied with plenty of groundwater from sources on the North Ranges. This is another deception of the GA. This article doesn't mention the replenishment fee, but I will. Residents were told it was to be used to purchase water. To date, not one drop of water has been purchased. Not only was this a lie, but there has been not much of an explanation regarding the use of this money. So here is the bottom line, gentlemen. The public, the very people you are supposed to be protecting, do not want this fiasco, and the valley doesn't need a pipeline. New data demonstrates we have plenty of water. Just ask the Water District for a copy of the newest and best results. In light of the malfeasance, deception, and apparent corruption displayed by the GA, it is my opinion and suggestion that the GA be disbanded immediately, and efforts to protect the IWV be turned over to the Water District and their competency. Now, are you there?
Yes, we're here.
Okay, I thought this was going to be on the website or during the meeting. Are you going to play it during the meeting?
You're speaking live during the meeting right now.
Well, but I didn't hear it. I'm watching the meeting on my other phone.
The YouTube stream, there is a delay in versus what is happening live. So you will see it. What you're hearing right now is a comment that was made before yours.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the explanation, and thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, not seeing any other callers on the phones. We will go now to board member comments. Any comments from the board?
I have a couple, if I could, for a second, Chairman. The first one I would like to talk about is the closed session. Not being able to attend closed session due to conflicts or whatever we've deemed the reason is. I hear a lot of the public comment sitting out here waiting for the meetings to start. So I would like to see a change made to the way the closed session is handled from this point forward. I would like to suggest that if we have closed session, it starts at 10 o'clock. It promptly ends at 11 o'clock to start the meeting. And then if it's not finished, we go back in afterwards and you guys address the closed session item. I think it's inconvenient for the public, and that's what we are here to represent. And the meeting is already during the day. I know personally, because I have to take off work. I know Director Heyman has to take off work. And these people that are here attending or watching are usually on a schedule. I know my son tries to watch it. He takes his break around it on base, and it's inconvenient for people to miss the meeting that want to watch it or potentially call in, because if they watch it later, they don't have the option to call in. So that would be my suggestion. I don't think it would be that much of an inconvenience if we started it, ended it, and went back if it wasn't finished. But I think the meeting should start at 11 o'clock, and that's just my suggestion. The other comment I would like to bring up is on October 21st, the Water District is having a public workshop, and I would hope that some of the board members could attend that, ask questions. I would like to get the public there, and as many people that can. It's going to be at the USO building. The city was not available for the meeting, so we have to have it there. But that's October 21st at 6 o'clock at night, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the board? Okay, not seeing any, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which is item number 8, and includes items 8A as well as 8B, 1 through 4. Is there any discussion from the board on consent agenda? Okay, not seeing any. Would any members of the public like to comment on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Chairman Peters,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman,
Aye.
Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo,
Aye.
Director Ittenhire.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item number 9, that's an update on Rademacher consolidation and approval of reimbursement agreement between Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority and the Indian Wells Valley Water District.
We're going to have a little tag team on this. One is the agreement part. I'll go quickly. The agreement is very non-consequential. It simply says that the GA is reimbursing the water district for any of its activities out there in accomplishing this project. We have to pay the water district within 60 days of completion. It was initially 30 days, but 30 days doesn't really work out if they give it to us 2 days before our board meeting, because we can't meet 30 to have the board approve it. And that's really it. It's a very straightforward, easy agreement, so.
Yeah, I think we have a short presentation, if we could pull that up. Here we go. Go to the next slide. The Groundwater Authority received a $3.5 million grant from DWR for implementing a shallow well consolidation project. In September, the board discussed the what we call the Rademacher well, which is really the well for the Desert Sands Mutual Water Company. That well has arsenic concentrations at 10 times the allowed concentration by the health department. There are 5 wells, or 5 homes that were connected to that well. 2 of those homes have subsequently connected to the water district. One of them is using water from a nearby well. The project to consolidate that into the water district system is going to be in 2 phases. The first phase is about 1,000 feet of pipe that's shown here in red. That was designed back in 2021 when this problem came up, and that will consolidate 2 of the remaining water users. The CEQA notice has already been filed and completed. You have the reimbursement agreement in your package for your consideration for the water district to construct the pipeline. We're talking to self-help enterprises about funding the connection from the meter to the house. Our grant does not do that. Self-help believes they can get funds to do that. There's an issue about the timing, which we'll continue to discuss with them. If we could go to the next slide. The estimated cost for that first phase is $262,900, and plan to start construction in December and estimated it'll take approximately 4 weeks. The second phase, if we could go to the next slide, is the dashed line shown here would continue up to China Lake Boulevard, come down China Lake Boulevard, and come back down to Springer Avenue, pick up the other remaining user, have the opportunity for, I think, 10 additional parcels that you see there to potentially hook up to the system. Let's go to the next slide. We've now got an estimated cost of $1.1 million for that second phase. And the design is underway by the Water District's consultant. Plans are to start that immediately after the first phase, and it'd take about 8 weeks for that construction. So with that, I'll answer any questions, and you have the reimbursement agreement for your consideration for approval.
Can you just describe the funding and how that's flowing and where that's coming from?
Yeah, there's a DWR grant from the Urban Community Drought Relief Program that's coming from DWR to the Groundwater Authority, and through this reimbursement agreement, the Water District is going to do the work, and they will be reimbursed from the grant funds that we'll get.
Any other board questions before we go to public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to public comment. Any members of the public like to comment on this?
Sophia Merck. How will this affect the ingress and the egress on public lands?
Okay, thank you. We'll get you an answer.
Well, there will need to be easements for the pipeline itself, and I understand some of the easements have been granted already, and then they're working on the rest of those.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Osley.
Judy Decker. Recalling past meetings and the discussion of DWR grants, I recall that with more than a few of the grants that the GA has received from DWR, it has taken quite a while to get the money from them, and yet you just stated earlier that the agreement with the Water District was to pay them within 60 days. So I wondered how that was going to work, because sometimes it takes a long time to get that money from DWR.
Okay, thank you. We'll get you an answer.
I appreciate that DWR sometimes is not the quickest in recouping money, and under grants, you spend it and then get recouped. But the Water District has a budget also it needs to operate under, so we will be using some of what we will call our reserve here at the GA to cover that. It's 60 days, I'm thinking maybe another 60 days that we'd have to cover it in the absolute worst case scenario. I mean, I can't imagine on a project this size that DWR will be taking a lot of time to get that recouped back to us.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Wes Kassenstein. Quick question. I understood it to be a $3 million grant. Does that mean there's still about half of that grant available to solve other problems?
Well, going back to a couple meetings ago, I believe we set aside, Jeff, $500,000 for you to study other areas that would be very conducive, and then 1.5, so we've got about 1 million left for actual construction.
We did talk about doing some studies to identify the best location. I don't think we set a specific budget for that, or that the board approved a specific budget. We were going to come back with those numbers.
That's true. We didn't set a budget. We didn't set a policy, but I think we had penciled in $500,000 because there was a discussion back and forth of of using all of it, and we said there's no way we could use it, and then I believe Chairman Peters said, don't use that as a challenge, and we said, no, we're not going to use it as a challenge, but I think we should be clear that we do not plan on spending all of that money on there, because at the subsequent water district meeting, that's exactly what they said our plan was to spend it all on studies, and obviously that's not the case, but we do need to do some study to find out where we're going to get the most bang for the buck.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question for Jeff while he's up there? He's talking about other projects. With that funding, and this is completely just a thought I was thinking about, what would be the likelihood or the legality of using part of that funding if the water district could work out some type of an agreement not to take over the Inyokern Community Service District, but to help the Community Service District if we ran a pipeline and then just sold them the water? It was just went through a meter, and then we provided the water, they ran their district. That would still be a consolidation if we work towards that, correct?
Seems like we should agendize a conversation about how to use the rest of the money, if that's what we're really trying to talk about for that. I mean, this item's pretty contained, but a whole question about legality and possibility and those kinds of things for the rest of the money doesn't seem like it's part of this agenda item.
Okay.
Yeah, related to that, you're asking us a question that we would have to look into the fine lettering of the grant agreement, and
Okay.
I think we've looked some at it, but I wouldn't want to hypothesize right now about what that looks like.
Right, thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, not seeing any on the floor, we'll go to the phones. Go ahead, caller.
Hello, this is Renee Westelusk. I just have a few questions. One is I'm concerned about there won't be any clear path for each of the homes to be hooked up to the water pipeline extension from the water district, because you said there isn't money provided for that, and that self-help may provide connections to the homes. But what happens if they don't provide that? What are the homeowners going to do? And that's my first question. And then I wanted to know, phase one, how many homes are being serviced by phase one?
Okay, thanks, Renee. We'll get you an answer.
Okay.
Yeah, phase one will pick up 2 of the homeowners and connect them. And we have a meeting with self-help and some of the state agencies on Friday to talk about this issue, about potentially funding these connections, not just for this project, but for any other consolidations that the Groundwater Authority does. So the self-help has identified who might have funding within the state and gotten them involved in the call. So we're hoping to get that question answered, before we get to the construction, about how the state or self-help can help us with that.
And I have one other question regarding what happens if there's more emergency situations like this Rademacher neighborhood and it exceeds the 1 million left. Is there anything going on the state level to grant more money for this drought condition problem that the money's coming from, the grant?
Renee, this is Michael McKinney. I can answer that question. The grant program that we received this grant under has been zeroed out due to the state's financial condition. So there is no more money in that program until the state's financial condition changes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, if I may for a second. Renee is asking a question of connection to the homes. The connection to the homes that's not generally covered by grants is only from the backside of the meter to the house itself. So we're talking a 1-inch piece of pipe buried 24 to 30 inches underground, and that run. That's what is generally not covered. I believe I'm hearing self-help now has processes to maybe fund that otherwise. I've in the past funded that type of construction work with the use of the capacity fees, Part of this consolidation will include a payment of capacity fees. I'm going to use the term capacity fees. Some people call them connection fees, but it's specifically covered in the government code section to cover the capacity that these homes need in the infrastructure. Think, if you have 1,000 homes that use one well, you can just divide it down and, your piece of that well is 1,000th of the well. That's what you have to pay for, and that's why you pay capacity fees. What we've done in the past and other consolidations is I've used those capacity fees as the fund at which those homes can then borrow from, have the district make the connection, and then pay that over time if they have to, over a longer period of time, because that capacity fee is not generally used. It sits in a reserve fund for quite a while until they need to build a new well or purchase water or some other event. That's one option that's been done in the past. We understand self-help might have an option that is beyond that, but I do want to make sure everybody understands that we're not talking a great sum of money. We're talking the connection behind the well to the house. I don't know how many feet these are going to be from the well, the meter. I don't know how many feet they're going to be, but that should not be a large cost in this.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Go ahead, caller.
Good morning. This is Elaine Mead. And I would like to ask a favor of you gentlemen. When you are speaking, everybody is leaning back in their chair, turning their head away from the mic, whatever. It appears you guys don't want to be heard. But I'm using my time to listen to this important meeting, and I would really appreciate it if you guys could do your part in having that happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other callers? Okay, not seeing any. We'll bring it back to the board for any final comments or a motion. Actually, this is just a receive and file, so do we need a motion on this?
Yes, you have a reimbursement agreement. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Before I make a motion, I guess I'll put on the table, it sounds like there's an interest in having a discussion about the remainder of the funds, and if that's a ripe discussion for our board to make some policy decisions about, I'm interested in hearing more about where that money might be spent specifically or how. Anyhow, but I'll make the motion to approve the agreement.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to make some comments?
I just had a couple comments. Jeff, you had mentioned 2 homes, but there is the potential for 8, is that correct? Or 7 or 8 lots that people could hook up on the first phase?
Yeah, the well that we're consolidating has originally had 5 connections on it. We're going to pick up 2 in the first phase. There are, I believe, one of the lots that will be, other lots we're fronting is already hooked up to the water district.
Okay.
And we haven't heard back from a couple of the other ones on the first phase yet. And we'll be reaching out to the second phase to all the property owners along that one.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, are the 2 white dots the wells? Is that how you have this, or are those homes on the print that we're looking at?
Those are yeah, where we believe there are wells. The one that's being consolidated is in the lower left there. It's yellow.
Okay. So what's going to happen then? This well is still going to be in use for those other 3 homes right now, correct?
One of the homes is, after we connect the first phase, there'll only be one user still on the Rademacher well.
Okay. Okay, so my concern is, how could we, I mean, we got one person that's going to be having an arsenic-affected water in this case. So I don't know if it's a water district question that I need to ask at my meeting, but my concern is there a way that we could use that water from the consolidation to fill their tank to where that person was essentially hooked up? Because I don't want to see somebody using that water. That's what we're trying to eliminate.
They actually are using a neighbor's well right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they're not having to, drink.
So the
or try and use
neighbor's,
internally.
the neighbor's well is fine, then it doesn't have?
Apparently.
Oh, okay.
Haven't seen the water quality on that one.
Okay. All right.
Okay, thanks. We've got a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, perfect.
I just want to clarify, is the motion to bring back an item next month included in that, or just the reimbursement agreement?
Future agenda.
I think we could probably ask Steve Johnson to include that in the Water Resource Manager's report under grant funding. I think that would probably be something that would work.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a comment before I made
Okay,
the motion.
just
The
wanted to make
motion's
sure.
just to approve the agreement.
Okay.
Is Steve on the line?
I think I should reiterate, Stetson is already working on a budget from the meeting before this where we talked about maybe $500,000 being that budget. So
Yes.
that's already out there and in progress, and Steve can tell us where it's at in progress. I don't know if he meant November.
I appreciate that. I just meant instead of agendizing a specific item, I think we could include this conversation under that heading at a future meeting.
If you're going to adopt the budget, I think we should have a motion on it, because you will be spending money and setting aside for that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. So the motion, I believe, as it is just to approve this item.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
Chairman Peters?
Aye.
Vice Chair Hayman?
Aye.
Director Griffin?
Aye.
Director Itmeyer?
Aye.
Director Vallejo?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Aye. It turned on after, sorry.
Okay, next item is item number 10, which is the recycled water presentation.
Good afternoon, members of the board. This is Michael McKinney. I'm going to be joined in this presentation by Stetson Engineers, I believe Jeff, if I'm not mistaken. This is a revisit of information that was provided to you in August and in October of 2023, dealing with financials and also dealing with the approval of the feasibility study under Title 16 of the WIN Act, which provided authorization for funding of the water recycling project. In your packet, you have what happened in October of 2023, which was a unanimous decision by the board to basically suspend work on the recycled water project. That was based on two issues: recycled water yield projections and also the per unit cost of the recycled water. Let me go into what the recycled water project is. It essentially is everything on the back end of the wastewater.
Oh, I think we lost you there, Mike.
Booster facilities, pipelines, and also the injection wells that are
Mike,
needed.
we lost you for about 20 seconds there. I apologize. Could you back up just a little bit?
No problem. Did you lose me at the description of the project? That is in your packet. It is basically the tertiary treatment facilities, the advanced treatment facilities, the booster facilities, the pipelines, and the injection wells that would be needed in order to do groundwater recharge. That was what was provided to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation for their review. In October of 2023, they determined that it was feasible from a construction standpoint and went ahead and authorized that under Title 16. Return flows from the plant. The initial or startup return flow for the plant is estimated at 1,573 acre feet per year based upon the current effluent flow into the city of Ridgecrest Treatment Plant. And then there are two issues regarding that. One is, of course, any efficiencies that happen on less water usage within the cities may make that go up or down, depending on how that works. And then also any contractual obligations between the city and the United States Navy for the secondary treated water that is used on the installation. The lifetime flow, or the average flow for the plant, is 2,223 acre feet over the 30 years of the plant's lifespan. Total project cost that Stetson has put together is $140,240,000 for the plant. That includes an initial planning cost of $5.3 million, and then the remaining $134 million is for the physical plant construction. The Title 16 feasibility study covers both planning and construction. And so Title 16 would provide you a maximum of 25% of the total project costs. However, there is a statutory cap in the WIN Act of $30 million. So that leaves a total federal share of $30 million and then a state and local funding share of $110,240,000. In your original analysis, we took three possible financing scenarios. One is a Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan. The second is what we call a WIFIA loan. And then the third would be to bond for it. And then we gave you some financing rates based upon 2023 percentages, interest rates, that would show what your quarterly payments and the total interest paid under each of the three possible financing scenarios. So if you were to look at just the physical plant construction under an SRF loan at the initial return flow, it'd be about $3,166, and then at the bond level would be about $4,089 per acre foot. Because this is physical plant, is eligible for a per parcel charge, and in this analysis, we have taken basin-wide, based upon the estimate of 20,000 parcels, and then within the water district service territory alone, based upon 13,000 connections, what a possible per parcel charge would look like. Annual operations and maintenance cost are in the report. They come out to be essentially at initial return flow of 2,060 per acre foot, and over the lifespan of the plant would be 1,458. If you were to take the annual plant financing charge, the physical construction, and the O&M charge under an SRF loan, it would be 5,227 per acre foot, and then it would go all the way up to 6,150 per acre foot. Right there, I'm going to stop and let you ask any questions that you may have regarding how we did these calculations.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Are there any questions from the board so far?
Yeah, I have a few for you, Mike. You mentioned the plant cost, is that correct? Was included in
Yes.
that estimate? Okay. Just for clarification, how much, the city already has the funding for the plant, is that correct or incorrect?
This does not include the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
This is only the tertiary facilities and advanced treatment, pipeline, and then the pumps. So it is not part of the wastewater treatment plant at all. That is a totally separate project.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
And so, Mike, so the annual per parcel charge is for the plant cost only. Does that not include the O&M costs?
No, O&M costs are typically done on a per unit basis, so they would be on a per acre foot charge. And I would have to defer to Phil Hall on the exact legal reasoning for that, but I know that's something that he has told me.
And so that would be an additional cost per parcel, or, so, okay.
It'd be a per unit charge, Director. So you could have a tax of anywhere between 249 if you were to go basin wide, all the way up to $494 per parcel per year if you were to do a bond just within the water district service territory. The annual operations and maintenance charge would have to be on a per acre foot basis or on a volumetric charge within the water bills.
Got it.
So it'd be an additional cost.
That would be subject to meet 218.
Right, I'm just getting to the point of the actual cost per, water user or parcel, so it's definitely adding up. Thanks.
All right, I think that's all the questions from the board for right now. Mike?
Very good. Title 16, you can kind of go through what the differences within Title 16 and what it will allow and what needs to happen in a particular time. Title 16 was authorized in November of 2023. It's a 3-year authorization and will expire in November of 2026. So the authority has until November 2026 in order to decide if it's going to exercise the authorization and gain this federal funding. It still has to apply for it. I want to make it very clear. This is not a grant. It is an authorization for funding. It would still have to go out and meet funding requirements through the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. Also, once you accept Title 16 funding, that is the maximum federal funding source. So it must come, all other monies must come from the local or from the state. There is a discussion in the packet dealing with bonding uncertainty regarding this. I will ask if you have any questions on it and probably ask Phil to assist me in this particular section. And then we are asking you to put in a recommendation basically on this, which is the authority has roughly 26 months to seek funding under Title 16. The cost estimates have not changed. The Buy America, Build America requirements will increase materials procurement timelines. However, we believe the cost estimates provided included all of the BABA requirements. And any major modification to the plant's design may trigger a re-review of the feasibility study. So we need to be cautious that if there are any major modifications to the plant, that it may have to go back through that feasibility study, but it will not extend that timeline. And then modifications to any of the cost estimates will be subject to validation by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and may alter the approval of that. Fees would need to be adopted in very short order to cover some of the costs. And there is serious consideration of the litigation's impact on the financing, on the ability to get financing for this, for the plant. The question at hand for you is the Water District has requested access to the Title 16 funding. That Title 16 funding is in the amount of $30 million of an authorization. And the issue before the board is whether or not it is willing to provide access to that $30 million authorization for the Water District. And from there, I'll answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Phil, did you want to go into the bonding uncertainty issues at all, or I know that at least there was some concern about how that water or that effluent gets distributed and having to do that in a fair way, I guess.
Some time ago, 2021, I've talked about this at the last meeting, 2021, we entered into a negotiation with the Water District to provide them the opportunity to have full access to this recycled water. The problem we are facing is Meadowbrook, Cyril's, and Mojave have all made claims on this recycled water too. Their position is, if it's a GA project, it's modifying the basins to say field, and they should get an equal share of it. Now, the only way around that is for the Water District to step up and take that water through a contractual agreement that was also offered to the others for under the same general terms, and for them to have declined. The Water District declined to do that. So it's very perilous right now to be talking about this as a Water District project when we have nothing to say why the Water District should get this over anybody else that uses basin groundwater. That creates problems with bonding and in the litigation in general, because they're suing over that very issue right now in the writ process. That's part one. The other part I wanted to point out is I wanted to show that this recycle project, and I've got demands up on the screen here. This is the pumping demands 15 years from now based on the verified initial disclosures in the groundwater adjudication. These were filed under oath. This is what everybody's saying their demands are in the basin. And you can quickly come down and see that the demand, including ag, is 35,300 acre feet. Just the domestic need is 18,416. And I want to put in here also, this doesn't include anything related to ET. ET is the plants in our entire basin that are also taking water out of this basin. So that isn't put in here. So to be clear, 18,416 is what we need to hit without having some other management perspectives or implementation projects. And this project, the recycle project, simply can't get there. That's why it has not been our number one focus at the GA, because these demands, and these demands are updated. They're actually, we've been more specific on some of them. It doesn't get there. The other thing I want to point out, because I'm sure Don will get up and say, Mr. Hall, you've left de minimis at 800 and small mutuals at 3. That's done because here's the reality of the groundwater adjudication. The reality of the groundwater adjudication is under the Long Valley Principle, which is settled case law now, also adopted into SGMA. If you are currently using water on your parcel, you are more than likely, and I would say even more than likely, you are almost certain to get zero allocation of groundwater. That's what Long Valley says. If you're not currently using, you can't get any. So if you're a parcel right now and you have a parcel, you've bought a parcel next to you and you plan on building a house and selling it someday in the future, that parcel will not have a water right. So that's why these numbers are stagnant for de minimis and small mutual on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Go ahead. I just have a comment. Looking at that chart, you know, the 18,000, even if it was a cost effective, it's not going to get us there, but at roughly close to $7,000 an acre foot, it's very cost prohibitive to even try to put it into the pool.
I just have a couple comments. I want to go back to Phil's statement that the district was offered the water and declined it. It was declined because of a caveat in an agreement that said we would not pursue any more legal action or would not do any more court proceedings. So there was ties made to that offer. It wasn't just, do you guys want the water? So the water district is very interested in working with the city and completing a project to use the recycled water. Recently, in the last couple of weeks, the district staff has went to a plant that is under construction. They got great information. Our consultants are working tirelessly on a project that we believe we could do effectively to help benefit this valley. I believe the Title 16 money is something that could be used to benefit the city and the Indian Wells Valley Water District and the people in this valley, and I think that's what's important. The numbers that we're looking at, Phil, if I'm correct, it's the 6,500 there for the Navy is inflated if the Navy wanted to move, if they moved everybody back on base. Is that not what was stated? That if in a demand, that would be the most they would use if everybody had to move back on the base that worked for the base. Was that not what was stated?
That is not what was stated. In the initial disclosure, the Navy lists 6503 as its Federal Reserve right. It lists its Federal Reserve right as on-base pumping. If you want to head down the path of doing an analysis here, I will say the Indian Wells Valley Water District number of 7830 is based on the urban water management plan of the water district. It shows what you believe you will be pumping. I think you can do a real mathematical calculation that shows if the Navy increases its use on base to this number, the water district number will also increase. So I can't tell you what secret plans the Navy has. They're not going to tell me what secret plans they've got. I don't know how many times they're going to use the snort track, which I recently found out because I was trying to find out what it stood for. That they have 2 acre foot pond out there at the end of that thing. I mean, they're not going to tell us. So if you're trying to say the Navy would be pumping less than that, they very well could. But you also have to use that Navy water for water district use. And as I understand it, that discussion didn't go anywhere, which is why the water district filed the groundwater adjudication. Because I don't know any other reason why they did it, knowing that you have a math problem here of 35,000 acre feet that's got to go into, if you use your 14, 14 doesn't do it, and if you use 7, it's even worse. So I anxiously await the water district's allocation chart.
I have a
Director Griffin, I need to clarify something with you regarding timing. Under Title 16, again, the authorization expires in November of 2026. Applications for planning would be due in March of 2025. Your only bite at the apple to get any planning funds would be March of 2026, provided Congress, and I'm sure Congress will, it's annually appropriated in this program, to put in funding for planning. So you're running up against a timeline that is very short order to come up with a project. And if you modify the project, then you were going to have to rerun it past the U.S. Bureau of Reclamations to determine whether or not that project is feasible or is feasible within the same authorization. So that can take up to 8 months for U.S. Bureau of Rec to review that type of a modification. We have this one approved in, Jeff, I think it was 10 months or 11 months from the date we submitted it, which was considered to be incredibly quick for the Bureau of Rec. So while November 26th seems like a long time away, it is going to come upon us very quickly. So use of these funds is eminent. The project needs to be defined and sent to Bureau of Reclamation if you're going to use the 25% under Title 16.
Okay. And my other question then, Mike, is the word of money, potentially there's 5 to 50 million, is that correct?
That is correct.
Oh, okay. So we don't know that amount yet, but if we could come up with a project and we did not proceed with the pipeline, we could use that money also towards that project, so we would have 80 million. Is that correct?
No, sir.
Why could we not? The word of money was not allotted to a specific project.
The word of money is in the final bill, in the conference committee report, will be allotted to an interconnection pipeline project.
Well, then that was misinformed when we voted on it as the board, because that's not what we agreed on. We voted to request money for funding to help the Indian Wells Valley with a water issue, and it was specifically stated by legal that we were not requesting it for a specific project when we voted on it.
It was not for a specific pipeline project, but it was for a water supply project.
So
it's been described to the Congress and approved by the board each time as we have asked for this funding authorization as an interconnection pipeline.
Chairman, if I can bridge the gap here. A recycle project does not bring new water into the basin. The word of funding is designed to bring new water into the basin. The Water District has made comments about a DWP pipeline, and we've responded by showing that DWP's pipeline has both operational problems and dollar problems, which cost to be out as much as the AVAC pipeline estimated out. The Water District has bought farmland in Inyo for the purpose of shipping it south, but we've got no project, no defined definition of any import project that could tie off going north instead of south. If they came with something, maybe we could do something there, but it is not a recycle project. Recycle is recycled water. This is for bringing new water into the basin. Also, I'd like to, just point out quickly that we have, again, we have a math problem. They're not going to give us $50 million to not solve the math problem.
And just to clarify, yeah, well, it says right here in the report, acceptance of Title 16 funding will limit all other federal funding sources. So regardless, if we accept Title 16 funding, I mean, we couldn't use any other WRDA funding or otherwise, could we?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. Title 16 is limited to water recycling projects and limits the total amount of federal funding available. It cannot be combined with WRDA. Conversely, the WRDA funding is for a new water source, and it limits the ability. It couldn't be combined with, say, a Title IX project under U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which would be a water supply project. So they're two different programs. They are mutually exclusive, and you cannot combine that funding in order to meet the funding gap. The $110 million in this particular plant is the responsibility of the local agency.
Understood. Any other questions, comments from the board?
So I just want to make it a clarification here that Director Griffin, that's incorrect when you say that when the city was in discussions with the water district in regards to the recycled water. Approximately 2 years ago, we met with the general manager, yourself, and I believe it was Mallory, and it was myself, Ron Strand, and one of the city council members. And you were not leveraged with litigation aspects to get out of litigation in those discussions.
Not by the city, it was through the GA. The GA had limited
Well,
us
you
and
made
wrote
it-
the letter.
you-
So I'll clarify that right now, yes.
Right.
The
There was-
groundwater
you were
authority.
not leveraged with that.
Not
And
by the
that was
city.
That was, we had discussions and offered that water to you, half or all. Those were in the early negotiations, so I just want to make that clear.
While we're on this, and I don't think it matters that much, but I will say that the main caveat in the proposal provided to the water district was, the water district, unlike the other parties, was going to be paying its replenishment fee and was going to agree to bond for that replenishment fee to lower the demand of the replenishment fee on the community over 30 years instead of 5. That was the main caveat.
Correct.
If the water district was willing to step up and pay for the water district at that point would therefore be in a position different than the others. It's paying for the water and it work as a contractual agreement. I should also point out there was another presentation. In fact, the first thing that we did after the GSP, I believe, we're very close to it, was we adopted a resolution which authorized and offered Cyril's and the water district the ability to go out, design their own recycle project for their benefit, and in doing so, we would credit them while they were in the design phase, replenishment fee charges, as though that project was moving forward. Both declined to do that.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
I'm still not quite fully grasping our control over this funding and why the water district needs our authority or our blessing to move forward with its own potential project. Sorry if I'm a little dense on the issue. I just haven't wrapped my head around how we're in the driver's seat in that regard.
Director, if I may clarify, the water district has the authority to construct any project that it wants to construct. The question before you is the access of the potential funding authorization under Title 16 and providing the $110 million funding obligation for the local match to the water district.
Sorry, I'm still not connecting the two in terms of that funding and our control over that funding, how we have control over funding, which would otherwise be for a project that the water district would itself pursue.
The feasibility study is in the name of the Groundwater Authority as originally requested. So we're the liaison with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation on that awarded or approved feasibility study. The water district could pursue its own feasibility study separate from that, and we would leave this one as what we call in government affairs stranded, meaning that it would not be appropriated against. The only thing before the board now is whether or not to provide the water district the authority to basically take over this feasibility study for the funding, and working with them with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation.
Okay, so stated another way, we were granted this funding at some point in the past, and now the water district wants to stand in our shoes for it.
That's my understanding.
Okay. What downsides to the groundwater authority might there be from relinquishing access to this funding? What other uses might we potentially put this funding toward if we had our own other projects in addition to the interconnection pipeline? How?
We run the same risk if we have a approved feasibility study for a water recycling plant that is pretty specific in its use in terms of tertiary treatment, advanced treatment, and injection. If we wanted to modify that to a different water recycling use, we would be subject to the same requirements of going back to U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and saying, is this included within your feasibility, and potentially having them re-review it. If we were to come up with substantial funding modifications to it, same issues. So if we relinquish it and it's used for its purpose, we don't have another Title 16 ability to do a recycled water project within the basin at that point. We would have to look at a different funding source.
So,
provided that they use this funding source, they being the water district.
right. So, like, question for staff, do we have any other recycled water projects reasonably potential on the table, or with a reasonable potential to move forward on the table? Is there any sort of other project that we are seriously considering? I mean, is there a real potential loss here for the groundwater authority is my question here in terms of availability for funding for a project that might actually have some legs?
I think if I could just jump in there, the biggest issue I see, at least with an approval from us, is that it's still going to require that 75% of these costs come from water users here in the valley. That, I mean, this is going to be an extremely expensive project, and that's going to put some pretty severe financial burdens on them, and especially considering that it doesn't fully solve the problem. I mean, if we're going to put those rates in place or fees in place, I would want to do it in a way that completely takes care of the problem. And so that's the main caveat I see with this.
My opinion's a little different than yours. I would like to see the water district be able to use the funding if appropriate, and we work on a project and see what our cost analysis comes up. As Mr. McKinney said, we may have to resubmit, and hopefully it could get done quickly if that was the case, if we had a revision to the plan. But I don't see how it affects the groundwater authority. If the project is not effective and we deem the same answer that the groundwater authority has chosen, just like, you know, we came out with our cost analysis of the pipeline project, the groundwater authority says, oh, that's way high. And you guys have come out with a cost of this project, we feel it's high. So we need to do our analysis and get it done and see if we can create a project that is feasible. If it's not, we can't go forward, and we understand that. But if we can do a project that's affordable for this valley, it benefits the city, it benefits the Navy, it's not going to affect the groundwater authority as far as financially or negatively.
Does the water district currently understand the recycling water project to solve the water debt that we are essentially accruing?
No, we think it will put a dent in the water problem, just like if we built the pipeline, it's not going to solve this problem. If you were using these numbers of 35,000 acre feet, even the pipeline's not going to solve the problem. So we're not getting a 100% answer from either project if that's the number we're using, and that's what we're trying to say. We're not going to do a project if it doesn't solve the whole problem, because according to this chart, we're talking 35,000 acre feet. And if we went with your numbers from the 7650, that's 28,000 acre feet of water we'd have to purchase every year. So we don't have the capability or the pipeline capacity to do that even. So if we built the pipeline, so either way, we're not getting a 100% answer, but every little answer we can get gains on a problem. So if it's recycled water, if we figure out how to someday in the future treat the brackish water, because we have a lot of brackish water. If we can work at all these little projects to get something done and reach sustainability and meet the goals of Sigma, that's where we're benefiting this community at the best affordable way we can. We have a duty to do that. That's just my thought.
If I can bring this first full circle, Chair, I guess the real question here is what stops the water district from going out and doing any study at once on recycled water today? And the answer is nothing.
Nothing.
I don't know why we are 5 years into a GSP and they're just now thinking about doing a study. I know they did one in 2019. They didn't like the numbers, and then they sort of stopped working on it. They were provided an opportunity to save replenishment fee and enter into a process to start doing a study. They didn't do so. I don't really understand the request today. We're hearing also about brackish water now. That's been ongoing for almost 7 years, $1 million plus invested. We still don't have a final report. Last public reporting I saw on it was that they were considering whether or not Searles Valley could still use that water. We haven't seen anything. I guess my bottom line here is there's really nothing for this board to do today. If the water district wants to do some sort of study, it is free to do so just like it has on the brackish, and it can on any other study it wants, and it should bring a proposal back to you with something in the GSP process to show this should be our implementation project. I mean, what we're really talking about right now is the water district wants an implementation project for the GSP, but is not engaging in the GSP process. We've asked for information 6 months ago. We've got an update today. If they wish to do studies, we can't stop them from doing studies, but I'm not really sure what their request is.
I don't think the water district just wants to do studies. The water district, as a board, wants to get an answer and create a solution to a problem, and that is our ultimate goal. We don't want to just keep doing studies and keep spending money and just blowing people's time and effort. We want to see a solution for this valley to reach sustainability, to work together as a working group of citizens and leaders and reach sustainability together.
I appreciate that, Chuck, and maybe I should use a different term other than the word study, but you're going to have a report which shows how much it costs, what's the return, and I'm calling that a study. Right now, you don't have a return, you don't have a value, you have an aspirational goal of using recycled water and some other projects to avoid an import project. And we have a GSP, we cannot put in the GSP, we have aspirational goals to find things in the future to achieve sustainability. We have to have quantifiable points of measurement, and we don't have that, and we have a process that we did in 2020, and now we're updating. And I mean, I'd like to be able to put an implementation project in there that says we can do all of this for free, but I don't have anything that says we can do that right now.
To clarify, Chairman, I think also to utilize the Title 16 funding, given some of the very tight timelines that would be involved, the water district would have to provide those initial revisions to the feasibility study, as well as a different cost estimate, because that was indeed validated by Bureau of Rec as part of the feasibility study. And those short time frames are coming on top of us. Plus, they will be required to immediately come up with planning funds in the amount of 75% of the $5.3 million in very, very short order. as well as being able to demonstrate as part of the funding agreement with U.S. Bureau of Reclamation how it will finance the remaining portions of the construction costs of the plant. We would need to know and direction from the board how much you want us to work with that, how much Stetson would be working with the water district to do that, and to turn this over, how much staff time you want us to allocate towards that, and then also when the plan to begin and initiate CEQA NEPA on this particular project, because it will have to be initiated prior to the November expiration date.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want to speak right now? Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I guess my question is, I'm with you, Director Griffin. I want to work together. I think we all want to solve these issues, but it seems to me like the water district saying we want to work together, but we don't want to work together with you. We want to take this and peel off and do something else. So would there be, I don't know, any interest on behalf of the water district of starting their work on this and bringing something back and saying, as a body, we can move forward and proceed with this?
Absolutely.
Okay, appreciate it.
But to meet those deadlines, I personally, I have doubts on whether those deadlines can be met by the water district. I think you've waited until the last minute of the hour to initiate this movement on it. And so that's my concern, is that we're maybe past critical point time here. I have concerns about that. Your past history is that you have delayed, and so now it's like we're at a point where, you got to come up with a whole lot of movement in a very short order of time. So I have a concern with that. So I agree. I would like to see a working, process, the mutual working process met, but maybe you can explain it and how you can
Yeah,
come to that.
I disagree with your comment that our history is we delay. We've been asking this question about wastewater. If you go back, I think I've mentioned it.
But it's been years that you've had
It's been years,
to do
yes,
something.
and we've asked, and we've asked, and
we're
we've
here.
asked, and we want to do something together and work, or independently if the GA is not interested, and I'm glad to hear that you are, and I asked that question, I think 4 months ago at a meeting, but we keep getting told no, just like the WRDA, and there's always a shutdown, and I don't think you understand that. It comes from either staff or somebody else. I'm enjoying that I'm getting to hear from a board member, and I appreciate that. So if you could tell me what your objections are.
Well, I have no objections, but it's been stated that there has been nothing that has prevented the water district from pursuing this and having something already in the workings.
We do have it in the workings.
So, but
I would say our project is pretty close to getting completed, the design of what we want to do. And so I don't think we're that far out. And we're not saying we want to start planning right now. I mean, we've looked at this, we've looked at percolation, we've looked at all types of things, but we're having to go through this process here, and that's why I was asking the question. We didn't ask to have this put on the agenda today. Am I correct or incorrect?
You're incorrect.
Okay.
2 board meetings ago, you asked. At that meeting, I
2
said.
board meetings ago.
I said, and then we had a board meeting that was very short because we had a very long closed session related to your litigation that ran up against some deadlines. This is true. But as I said at that meeting, and I'm saying now, you can go, call it a study, call it a proposal, call it whatever you want. You now have the ability, authority, all that you need to put together a recycle project that you can come to the GA and say, we would like this included in the GSP as an implementation. We've asked for that. We tried to lower your replenishment fee so you could do that, and we were told no. I mean, you're looking at me. I'll show you the resolution. We offered it to you and Cyril's. It would lower the replenishment fee so that you could do it. Because I agree, There's no way the recycled water project was going to go out to farms way out there. The piping wasn't feasible, but we were subject to that in a litigation aspect. So, or the other side of it is it becomes part of the water budget and in-lieu pumping use. Whatever, it was an issue. You've had 6 years to bring us a proposal, and there isn't one. And I'll be honest with you, I don't understand the request today. There's nothing that stops you from putting together, if you don't want to call it a study, you want to call it a proposal, nothing stops you from putting together a proposal which says how much water will be returned that we can take in and put into the water budget, at what cost, and as I've said, I anxiously await the water district's allocation chart.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the board? No. Okay, with that, we'll go to public comment.
Through the chair to Mr. Hall, please. Mr. Hall, I want to remind you, because it's only fair to the public, that in 2020 during COVID, there was, the Water District voted against that replenishment fee. There was almost 3,000 protests to the Prop 218 against that replenishment fee. So I believe it's so frustrating. I believe it's so unfair to keep going back and requesting them to bond something they voted against. And so please, Groundwater Authority Board, understand you're voting down a path that puts the cost of this whole thing on the backs of the constituents you serve. So please, please remember that as you keep going down this path. The pipeline, we don't believe is the answer, and Judy, that's why we did the letter. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Judy Decker. I have 2 things. First, I'll deal with the detail. No one, and when I say no one, I don't mean just you people, no one has discussed very much the impact of the rampant drug use that people all over the nation are using that goes into the sewer recycling, the sewer ponds. If you decide to build a recycle facility and inject this water into the groundwater, you need to find out a way to take out those drugs. The second thing I have to say is the comment Mr. Heyman made about the water district delaying is true. 38 years ago, I started my service to this community on the Indian Wells Valley Water District. In those 38 years, managers have changed, boards have changed, but the philosophy is still the same. It is do anything possible, but do not import water. Why? If it had been started 40 years ago, we would have it now at a reduced price. It is the only way to solve the water problem in this valley. And this has been pointed out to this board since its inception. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon. George Kroll, General Manager of the Water District. Just want to make a couple comments. So the first comment I make is the deadline for sustainability established by the state's 2040. Is that correct? Yes?
That is incorrect.
What's the deadline for sustainability?
The deadline for sustainability is determined by the local board. Some people have tried to say 2040 and you can jump off a cliff in 2040. Others have tried to figure out your ramp to 2040. Others have decided whether or not you can do U-curves to get to 2040. The reality is it's determined at the local agency. In this particular basin, if we wait to 2040 without doing anything, 1 in 4 de minimis wells are gone according to our studies. They're gone. That's 200 plus wells.
So what is your deadline for sustainability, this board's?
The deadline for sustainability, according to this board, is now. That's why we are trying to get funding for import project. That's why we're trying to build. That's why we have an import project, and that's why we calculated out in the import project the best thing we could do in the import project on a time frame of when it would be constructed. We took that amount of water that would be withdrawn from the basin by domestic current long-term use. We then used the same amount of water because it was only fair to allow ag to transition out of the basin.
So what we're saying is that it'd be nice if we were in sustainability today, but it's going to take time to get to sustainability. Is that correct?
Okay, let me jump in here real quick. We're asking stuff that we have been talking about in here for 10 years. We know what Sigma is, but this conversation is about the recycled water project. So do you have any comments specific to the recycled water
Yeah,
project? Because we're not going to keep rehashing the same thing at every single meeting.
Okay, I guess specific to the recycled water project is I believe that we have time to do the recycled water project. It's presented at this meeting as if we don't have time. We may not get there in time to receive this funding that the GA applied for. That's okay, but the recycled water project would in fact provide significant benefit to the aquifer here if it were completed. Is that correct?
This isn't a question and answer session. This is public comment.
So
And
it would.
I will
So I will
say,
say, yes, it will help. So there's another question that I had about the presentation. I read both the Senate and the House version of the WRDA bill, and neither of the versions that are currently up on the internet appear to have language that limits that to only an imported water project. I did see in your packet that you were changing the language in such a way just recently that would in fact limit it to a imported water project. And to Director Griffin's point, that means that the time and the language that was proposed when the board said, yeah, it could be used for anything, and the time at which the language was changed was significantly after. It appears that it's only being changed now. Is that correct?
okay, number one, we're on the recycled water project, not on WRDA.
No,
This
we're
is
on this
discussing Title
we're on this
16.
presentation we're talking about right now. And in the presentation,
We're
they
talking
said,
about
in this presentation.
Title 16 funding.
In this presentation, it was
We're talking
presented
about
that
Title
the,
16 funding.
that the WRDA funding, in this presentation, it was said it was limited, and it was not limited until just now.
I was clarifying that funding is not eligible for this project. It is not relevant to this project. This is about Title 16 funding.
That's
that can't
because
be
it was
confused.
only changed
That is
recently.
that is because Title 16 funding can't be combined with other federal funding sources, as it
No.
says right here in this report.
No, what was said was
Okay.
that the WRDA limits it to a pipeline project, and that change was only recently made, and I have not seen it on the internet yet.
Mr. McKinney, would you like to respond to that?
The two versions of the bill need to be reconciled in conference committee. An agreement between the conference committee on the final version of the bill is being reconciled at this time. Directive language within the committee report will direct the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to use this for a new water supply. It has been described to Congress for 2 years as an interconnection pipeline, which spans and provides imported water to the Indian Wells Valley. It has never been described as being a water recycled project. In addition, Title 16 would be ineligible to be used for a water supply project. It can only be used for a water recycling project, hence the reason that the board directed us for the years that we were working on recycled water to go after the Title 16 feasibility study for the recycled water project, and then also pursue WRDA for the interconnection pipeline project.
Thank you. Okay, next speaker, please.
Joshua Nugent, Mojave Pistachios, and I just had a short, kind of little like minuscule comment that I hope's taken constructively. At one point that talked about there being a fee being assessed, and it talked about per acre as being one of the, or per parcel as being one of the options. I would just recommend, probably we're hurting ourselves because we have some of the larger parcels, but if you could include a per acre component of that, so if someone had like a 2.5 acre parcel versus 640, it would not adversely impact someone who had a small parcel. So just a suggestion.
Chairman, if I may, we were loose with language there. That is what happens when you overlay a city with ag and have acreage versus parcels. There's a mathematical calculation of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Okay, not seeing any. We'll bring it back to the board. Is there?
Mr. Chair, what
Yes, sir.
what resonates with me at the moment is the idea that we have had a recycled water project in our GSP as a potential project. And we did, as a board, explore that option, and I recall years back, discussing and then ultimately rejecting that project based on cost per water concerns at the forefront. I'm not opposed to a recycled water project. I'm skeptical about the cost and the efficiency. I do think at this point in time, if our board wants to pursue a recycled water project, we should, and if the water district wants to pursue its own recycled water project, it should. I personally am not ready to make a motion or take an action with regard to the Title 16 funding, but if the water district believes it has a project that it's working up that it can bring to us that we might actually adopt as an agency as part of our GSP, I'd be interested in hearing about that if they were able to bring that forward.
Thank you, Director Vallejo. And I just want to jump in there real quick and say I agree completely. I think this is something that we've looked at for a long time. We've looked at things in the past. We've considered it from every angle. And if there's a project that's going to help the Indian Wells Valley, I think everybody here is on board on that. I don't understand this constant adversarial spot that we're in, but I personally would be more than happy to hear from the water district if they have a plan put together and would like to be a part of the GA and present that as part of, as a member of the GA. I'm all about hearing it and listening to that proposal. So that would be my direction as well. Any other members of the board like to comment?
So are we today looking at giving consideration to the time constraints and as listed from the staff? Is that what we're looking at doing?
Personally, I think not really, not necessarily, opining on whether they can meet the time constraints or not, but just if there's a plan, by all means, let's hear the plan, let's present it, and if it's a feasible plan, let's move forward.
Okay.
Okay, I understand that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Does that provide sufficient direction, or do we need to take a vote on that?
No, there's no vote needed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that takes us to item number 11, groundwater sustainability plan modeling and periodic evaluation update.
Yes, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act requires that the Groundwater Authority every 5 years conduct a periodic evaluation to determine if the groundwater sustainability plan for the basin needs to be amended in order to achieve sustainability based on any new information that's come forward or changes in the situation in the basin. So we've been working on the periodic evaluation for Indian Wells Valley. The periodic evaluation is due by the end of January of next year. As part of that process, we've updated the model, and Susie from the Desert Research Institute made a presentation to this board 3 months ago, I think, on the modifications to the model and the calibration of the model, and also the first 2 modeling runs that were done, the baseline modeling run, and then what we were calling our implementation modeling run. That is, what if we had the imported water project in place and did modeling based on that. What I'm going to start with is some additional modeling that's been done since her presentation. I'm going to talk about another implementation run we did, which I'll get into and describe a little bit more. The one that she described, they're now referring to as implementation run 1A. I'll be talking about implementation run 1B. We also ran what we're calling a no groundwater authority modeling run, and that incorporated the initial disclosures that Phil Hall referenced and showed the numbers for there. And then we did a modeling scenario where some pumping was moved from the main part of the basin into the El Paso Basin. There's also been some technical work done. A technical memo was prepared on the nature of the El Paso Basin and reviewed by the Technical Advisory Committee and got some good comments back on that. And the purpose of that is to have a discussion about whether that should be a separate management area in the basin. And then we received some recommended corrective actions from Department of Water Resources on the groundwater sustainability plan when it was approved. One of those recommended corrective actions was to look at the potential impact of climate change on our implementation plan. So we've done some modeling to look at that I'll present. So if we could go to the next slide. So the implementation plan that Susie had presented to the board had the imported water project coming online in 2030, and it didn't include a recycled water project based on the discussion the board had previously had. And we assumed that when the imported water project came online, we would get the basin pumping down to 7650 equal to the recharge by providing imported water to the water district to do in lieu recharge to basically reduce the total pumping in the basin down to 7650. And we showed the results of that. This is an alternative to that, or a modification of that. In that modeling run, Searles Valley Mineral continued to pump as they have been pumping. In this modeling run, we've adjusted their pumping down to 300 acre-feet a year, which was a number we'd used in the original GSP for pumping for them, and assume that they would be using imported water for their other needs. So we've also adjusted the water district's pumping down, but we've adjusted it down less than we did in that pumping 1A, because with Searles reduced pumping, we didn't need to adjust the water district's pumping by providing them with as much imported water. With the domestic pumping, we started with 832 acre-feet a year, and it included some potential growth for that to look at the impact on the basin and implementation. The community service district, Inyokern, was its a recent average with some potential for some growth. The Navy at its requested 2041 acre-feet per year. And Ridgecrest, they had some values in their initial disclosures that we used. And then most of the rest of the pumpers were their recent average pumping. So if we could go to the next slide. This is the water balance, but it's over the period from 2020 to 2070. And this isn't really useful to see whether we're achieving sustainability, because we're using these early years where we have high pumping, but it's useful to compare the different modeling runs that I'm going to be showing you. And we've separated out the main basin and the El Paso sub-area and then given a total. And the reason we've done that is we're going to be talking here about the El Paso sub-area itself, and this just shows you some of the relationships there as we're going through these different modeling scenarios. And if we go to the next slide, I'll show you the results of this, bringing in imported water, reducing both Searles and the water district's pumping. We see from 2020 to 2070 that up on Brown Road and over here where Searles does their pumping, that the water levels increase. That's the green. The parts of the basin over that period are still the yellow, and the little darker yellow are from still reductions in groundwater levels over that time. From 0 to 10 feet is the lighter shade, and I think 10 to 20 feet reduction in water levels are the darker yellow shade. And then on the right is the groundwater level changes from 2040 to 2070. And you see we continue to see some rising groundwater levels up on Brown Road. It's assumed, by that time the ag pumping is stopped out there, and the water levels are still recovering on past 2040. So I'll show a couple of hydrographs. One of them's a well. Might be a little bit hard to see, but it's labeled, the black dots are wells, and one of them's labeled 2 there at the bottom of the green area in the map on the right. It's sort of out on Brown Road at the bottom of that green area. Another one will be well 6, which is at the west end of town, and then another one will be well 8 on this map, is kind of down a little, sort of in the area of the Water District Southwest pumping field there. So if we look at the hydrographs, go to the next slide. So the blue line is the baseline model run that Susie had presented to you a few months ago. And that basically assumes that pumping as it is right now, or as it has been in the last 2 or 3 years, continues out to 2070. So this is the well that's out on Brown Road, and you see the blue line continues to decline. But the green line, which is our implementation scenario 1B, we see we start to get recovery right about in 2027. At the time we put this modeling run together, which was a few months ago, the court had granted the injunction on Mojave's pumping. We assumed their pumping stopped in 2027. There'd be some procedures that needed to go through. This well is very close to Mojave Pistachio's pumping, and we see that this well starts to recover almost immediately with that reduced pumping, and then stabilizes out towards the end. Next hydrograph. This one again is the west end of town, and again the baseline, it continues to go down. With the implementation, it rebounds a little bit and then stabilizes. And then if we go to the next one, which is sort of out near the southwest pumping field, again the baseline continued to go down because we assume no reduction in pumping, and under the implementation run we get stabilization there. So that's scenario, what we're calling 1B implementation. If there's any questions, I'll stop there on that.
Any questions?
Okay, and these are starting to, be our look at what's going to be in the performance evaluation, what will ultimately could be in the amended GSP. We're looking at the imported water project. At the moment, we're looking at no recycled water and this method of managing the basin, which is why we wanted to put it out there. Okay, so we'll go to the next scenario. Yeah, and that's no groundwater authority. The pumping as it was presented in the initial disclosures in court for the entities that are listed here. Domestic pumping, again, we used the number it was estimated back in 2020 GSP with some growth, and most of the rest of the pumpers who didn't have initial disclosures, we assumed their recent pumping that should say, that last line, water year 2020 to 2023, not 2020 to 2070. We assume their recent average pumping continued into the future. And if we go to the next slide for the water balance, here's where it's illustrative to look at these over the 2020 to 2070. The bottom line in the bottom right-hand corner, when we had looked at our implementation run, the average annual change in groundwater storage or groundwater loss was about 5,700 acre-feet. Under this amount of pumping, the average annual loss is almost 38,000 acre-feet. We'll go to the map. And the very dark brown areas on the left for the changes in groundwater elevations between 20 and 2070. There's a really dark brown area out on Brown Road, and then another one around the southwest well field, and that's a groundwater level decrease of 70 to 80 feet. And as you go through the different shades, they're increments of obviously 10 feet, all the way out to, I think, 0 to 10 feet in the light yellow in the basin. And then looking out from 2040 to 2070, we still see a pretty large, or see some areas that are 60 to 70 decrease in groundwater elevations from 2040 to 2070. And if we go to the hydrographs, the brown line is the plot for this pumping out on Brown Road. It drops 60 feet lower than even the baseline that we had looked at, where if the current pumping increases, this shows that the planned increased pumping would be even 60 feet lower groundwater levels by 2070. And go to the next hydrograph here at the west end of town. It's about 30 feet lower than the baseline was projecting. And then the last hydrograph, do I have one? Yeah, I have one. Last hydrograph is down near the southwest well field. It's about 30 feet lower than what the baseline had been. Phil had mentioned the initial disclosures. We'd done a modeling run just to look at what that would look like. If there's any questions on that, I'll stop there. Okay, well, let's go to the next one. Now we're going to talk about El Paso. I'm going to talk about the modeling first, but we also have some information out of the technical memo that was created. And again, it's all sort of looking at the question of should it be managed any differently than we have it in the GSP right now. And what we have in the GSP right now is we have a representative monitoring well, and at representative monitoring wells, we set sustainability criteria, and we have one well with a sustainability criteria in the El Paso Basin currently. And I'll come back to that as we go through all of this. The question is whether, and we don't have to answer the question today, we continue to do that, or whether we do something different as far as managing that part of the basin. So we moved some pumping. We moved, the water district's pumping about 500 gallons per minute, although we assumed it was operating 90% of the time, from the southwest well field over into the El Paso Basin. The other things we assumed were that imported water project would come in 2030, no recycled water project again, that domestic pumping would grow at 1%. In Kern Community Service District, its current average with some growth. The Navy at the requested 2041 for planning purposes, and similar to the other things I'd gone through for the remainder. So we go to the water balance. So again, just looking at the bottom right-hand corner, it's similar to our implementation run because we are implementing imported water. We are doing many of the same things, reducing pumping in the basin by bringing imported water. So we're at about 5,400 for the entire basin. I should point out the amount of change in groundwater storage in the Bain Basin went down a little because we moved some pumping out, but the amount of change in groundwater storage in the El Paso area went up quite a bit because we had moved some pumping there. And I think the hydrographs, the maps and the hydrographs are a little more illustrative of what the impacts are. If we could go to the next slide, it's the map. And we see up on Brown Road, because we're implementing the GSP, the transition pools are over. It's assumed that ag pretty much is stopped by our sustainability date. We're seeing groundwater recovery. But there in the El Paso area where you see the brown, we're seeing groundwater declines just from pumping 500 gallons a minute over 50 years. We're seeing groundwater declines of 50 to 60 feet in the darkest area, relatively small area, but a lot of the areas, 40 to 50 feet reduction in groundwater level on the left. And then over on the right, in 2040, we see still, continued decline over there and more recovery. We've moved a little pumping out of the main basin, and the ag areas continue to recover there. So if we look at the hydrograph, go to the next slide. We've got the baseline there. Oh, sorry, this is different hydrograph. This is down in El Paso Basin itself. So at the baseline, you can see it's fairly stable, but it is slightly declining. And I think under all the modeling runs, the El Paso Basin does slightly lose water out of storage because the water's flowing into the main part of our basin because the groundwater levels are so much lower. But if we pump 500 GPM, we drop the groundwater levels by 2070 by about 40 feet. So that was the only hydrograph I had. The rest of the hydrographs in the basin are somewhat similar to the implementation run that we showed you, with a little better recovery because we've moved 500 GPM out of the main part of the basin. So if we wanted to do a different management area, the DWR has guidelines on that. You can do that. You have to justify why you've done it. I have a good explanation of why this area should be managed differently. You have to set different management thresholds, sustainability criteria for it. And a lot of what we have in the technical memo, and we present some of it here, is justification about why the El Paso Basin is different from the main part of the basin and could justify defining it as a separate management area. So we go to the next slide. So I mentioned we had a technical memo. It probably will qualify. El Paso Basin covers about 30% of the area of the total basin. And that just shows you where it's at in green there. Go to the next slide. The El Paso area is separated from the main part of the basin by the Freeman Fault. And there's a very steep groundwater gradient between the El Paso and into the lower groundwater elevations in the main part of the basin. Go to the next slide. There's currently not significant pumping. There is one, we've called it a domestic pumping there. I'm not sure if it's true domestic, but it's a very small pumping that we know of in the El Paso Basin. As I mentioned in that hydrograph from even the baseline, is the groundwater levels are generally stable with a very slight decline over time. And that's different than the main part of the basin, where we're seeing, much more rapid decline in groundwater levels in the main part of the basin. So it is definitely reacting differently to the pumping that's going on in the main part of the basin. Next slide. I won't go into a lot of details. We looked at geochemistry, or people who know about it looked into it. And I'm going to show you a plot of the anions and the cations, simply because it gives you a visual and it's real clear what's going on. So we'll go to the picture. And what you do is the top, you have sodium on the left-hand, top left-hand, in all these figures. There's a sodium ions on the left hand of that black bar, and I think bicarbonates to the right hand, and you go through these different anions. But you can see the three on the left are all on the west side of the fault. The shapes are all the same. That means the relative concentrations of the different anions and cations are the same. So the ones on the right are all on the east side of the fault, and the shapes of these plots are the same. So they're all the same, but they're all different from each other across the fault. So we've got different water chemistry on each side of the fault. Another justification potentially for a different management area. If we look at the hydrogeology on the next slide, these are the soil formations there on the east side of the fault. We see lots of clays and silts immediately to the west of the fault, where at least in the upper area there we're seeing more sands. So that's somewhat different. And then my last slide on this, if we could go to that. So we are losing some storage water out of storage from the El Paso into the main part of the basin. If there were any pumping, we would lose a lot more, and the groundwater basins would the groundwater levels would decrease significantly. Also, if we pump it out of the El Paso, water out of the El Paso, that's going to reduce the flow from the El Paso into the main part of the basin, where we're doing most of our pumping, so we don't net gain anything by doing that. We have a current, I didn't point this out on the hydrograph, we have a current sustainability criteria if we pump 500 GPM out of that basin, we'll drop below that by the year 2032, which is, and stay there for the whole time. So I think it's one of the things we want to come back to. Do we want to restrict, prohibit pumping, set up a separate management area to do that? Only allow maybe some de minimis or domestic pumping if that's proposed in the future. There is a process where anybody who tries to get a drilling permit has to come to this board to see if the proposed pumping is consistent with our plan. Those are all things that potentially could be used to look at this issue. But I think what it shows, if there is any significant pumping, we're going to violate our sustainability criteria. And that's what I wanted to present on that. Any comments anyone has?
I have a few questions. Where was the well located that you say is declining? Because according to the research that I've done, there is no declining well in that area, in the El Paso, on that south part. So I'd be really curious to know where that's at. And then also, when you ran your model, what depth did you run across? I see you've got some references here, but on your seismic lines, because I guess our numbers just don't match up on what we have in that base, that part of the basin. That water is at a higher static level than the water on this side. So we do get run over, and I understand that. But that's what I've been asking this question since I've been on this board, is why are we not doing some pumping from that area? Because we have, if that water's fingerprinted, we can see where it goes into Freeman. And you have some different things here to say that, it's pretty much the fingerprints there for the water quality. So I guess I want to know about your model. And I know the district is asked to see that model so we could put some numbers in to run that same scenario. But can you tell me some information on how you did that and what depth you went to as far as an
Chairman,
overview?
if I can ask a question for a moment. I hear from the director that he has scientific knowledge that he hasn't shared, that he would like us to now analyze in a meeting off the cuff because he hasn't shared it.
I'm asking the
I
question.
also hear that they have a model. Their attorney just stated in court last week they do not have a completed model.
We don't.
Will not have a completed model for 6 to 7 months from now. I would caution that hypothesizing about data that is not presented to Jeff in a model situation, or as pure data that he can look and see if there's been some misreading of what they've done at DRI, is improper. I look forward to that data being presented. Now is the time for the Water District to present any data it has.
I don't think I mentioned anything about the water district. I said, I asked him, because the information I have on the wells, which well was going low, which one was declining. I didn't say the water district's model or anything else. I asked about his model. I never referenced anything about the water district model.
You stated you had well data.
I do have well. There's well data all over the place.
Are you using?
Wells are decreasing.
I'm confused. Are you using the data that you've received from the GSA, or are you receiving outside data?
No, you can go on and look at on Kern County Water Agency, and you can look at the wells.
So you're referring to water agency data?
Yes, you can look anywhere for wells.
Okay,
You can physically go out and sound the well. I have personally went and sounded a well with a well sounder to see where it's at. Because I'm that interested in wanting to know the truth and the answers.
Did you present that information for us to use in our data?
As a personal going out and measuring a well, no, I did not. I've said several times I went and checked the wells, and those wells are not going down in that area, so I asked Jeff where that well was at so I could personally go put a sounder down it and see if I could get permission to do that, because I would like to track it. I want to see where this information's coming from and know if it's going down, because I don't see that it is.
Okay.
And the people I'm talking to with wells, they're saying different, so I want to know the answer. That's why I asked.
I want to
Jeff.
be clear. You are not referring to water district data in an incomplete model. You are referring to your own private investigation.
Absolutely, I never brought up anything about a water district model.
No, actually, you didn't tell us it was your private investigation or the water district model, but we earlier today heard about a water district model that doesn't exist still. So I want to understand, you also referenced fault line data, because you asked for depths of fault line.
I did ask him about the fault lines.
I don't know.
You can see right here where he had his to 800 feet and 700 feet.
I will again
1,300
ask, because we know the water district has gone out and gotten fault line data.
Okay.
Are you using your own personal data or the water district's data?
I did not, I asked him a question about his fault line data.
Okay.
I did not mention any other fault line data. I asked him. I see he used fault line data. How deep did he go with his model when he ran it? That's the question I ask. If you're trying to hang me, you're not going to hang me. So I don't appreciate the attempts. I don't appreciate the integrity, or I don't even know what it's called, but you're not going to upset me. I have the right as a board member to ask him a question, and I would appreciate it as our chair, as a board member, to please address legal and have him stop answering all the questions I would like to hear from my fellow board members.
Okay, I will address that, but this is all part of litigation that's been instigated by the water district through the adjudication, and as legal, it is his job to ensure that accurate information is being portrayed. I, by all means, am waiting for them to respond, but.
And that's all I asked was a simple question.
Phil Hall is doing his job as well.
And I will just add also, it's not just about litigation. We are here being a regulatory body for the general public out there. And we have a board member here who is relying on, at least at a water district level, when it files adjudication lawsuits and others, on information that it has kept to itself. It has not made it public. And now we've got questions related to the GSA and the GSP, which are data-driven. So all I've done is ask questions as to how you've gotten those. You've now identified that it was your own private investigations. Thank you.
And I also went to Grapevine Canyon this weekend, just so you know, and I did a flow test on a personal level while I was deer hunting, so you're aware of that. If you want me to track when I take a leak, I'll call you.
That's okay, I don't need that.
Director, you'd asked, how deep the well was that pumped. I don't know. We didn't model a shallow well. It was a deeper one. I'll get you the information on exactly how deep that was. I was making the comment about the declining levels based on the projection we were looking at on that hydrograph for the baseline run, where there was, still just that de minimis pumping in there. It was showing it was declining over that period.
Okay, so my other question was, you showed some chemistry. Did you run that chemistry in Fremont Valley, or have there been any tests, just out of curiosity, to see if that water was flowing into the Fremont?
Whether the El Paso
Correct.
groundwater was flowing into Fremont Valley. I don't know if we looked at that water chemistry.
Okay, I was just curious if you had ran a finger on it.
We do have some water chemistry from the DWP releases, that went through that general area that's in a draft tech memo that's out there, and it compares it to the surface water chemistry and the groundwater chemistry. And I would also point you back to, and I won't go through it now, but under scenario 1B, the water budget in the El Paso area shows over that 20 to 70 period, there's an average of 1,549 acre feet of recharge into the El Paso Basin, and an average of 1,611 acre feet a year going out of the basin. So over that modeled period, at least, it's losing on average about 64 acre feet a year, but it's losing it to the main basin. So if we pump it in the El Paso Basin, then that's less recharge into the main part of the basin, and we might have to come up with different, separate sustainable yields perhaps, and reduce the one in the main part of the basin.
Okay, thank you.
Just something we'd have to look at. If there's no more on that, I'll go to the next subject. One of the, go a couple more, right there. Oh, back up. One of the recommended corrective actions from Department of Water Resources is they wanted us to include any additional projects or management actions that might be implemented to achieve sustainability if the imported water project couldn't be implemented. So we've got a few slides, thoughts on that. It's something we'll need to address in the periodic evaluation and in the amended groundwater sustainability plan. If we go to the next slide. All right, if we don't have imported water, all we've got at this point is groundwater. There was some, there's been discussion on already today. There's not enough groundwater to provide the current domestic needs alone. Using the average in 2023, including the Navy's use, we've got demands of around, domestic demands of around 9,500 acre feet, which is greater than our 7,650 of recharge. That doesn't include all of Searles Valley Minerals pumping, or it doesn't deduct out the evapotranspiration that's on average around 3,000 acre feet a year, depending on what the groundwater levels are. We are doing some modeling on evapotranspiration right now to try and understand that better. It's something else DWR commented on. The Groundwater Authority doesn't really have the ability to manage most of that domestic demand, in-home demand. So open to input don't have a way to manage the basins to sustainability without imported water at this time. And those are all, that's all I had. The DWR wants us to address it. I wanted to start a discussion on it. So that's what we have. Any comments or questions on that?
I have a question, Jeff. In regards to the El Paso sub-area, it states that if the pumping were to occur in the El Paso, groundwater and storage would decrease and groundwater levels would significantly decrease. Is that in reference to the overall groundwater and storage in the basin as a whole? Or is it to the groundwater storage in the sub?
That was only in the El Paso basin.
Okay, so
'Cause
with that,
what we've done is taken the amount we were decreasing storage in the main part of the basin, we're now decreasing it in the El Paso part of the basin.
so pumping in the El Paso region then, and I don't think we know these numbers, but in past studies on the ET or the evaporative transpiration, as we lowered, if we start pumping and lowering that groundwater level, at what point does the vegetative flora start to be negatively impacted, and how that increases ET on top because of shade and plant life, and then you decrease that, and now you have more heat and more ground draw from the evaporative effect. I mean, it seems to me we're looking at, considering taking an area that if we take water from it is going to decrease and increase chronic lowering of our main basin by decreasing, some water flow into it, but yet taking an area that's maybe relatively stable now and creating a negative impact and chronically lowering that sub-basin and creating a larger negative effect on the situation as a whole. That's a lot of words.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. We definitely are taking some of what was reducing the groundwater and storage and the groundwater levels in the main basin, and we're just doing it over, and now we've spread it over into the El Paso basin. At the same time, we're reducing the flow from El Paso into the main part of the basin, so we're not helping things in the main part of the basin as much as it looks when we move the pumping. Now, on the evapotranspiration, and we will probably have a discussion on that in the future also, most of the evapotranspiration that's connected to the groundwater is down on the playa in the main part of the basin. That number we're throwing around, about 3,000 acre feet, that's where that's taking place. There probably is some in the canyons, some evapotranspiration that's really surface flow, very shallow subsurface flow. In the main parts of the basin, it's not as much a groundwater ET. It's mostly in the playa. So the El Paso probably wouldn't have a significant impact on the ET itself.
Okay.
Hey, Jeff, it's fairly academic when you talk about the idea of moving pumping to the El Paso area. Who would be moving the pumping?
The water district, I think, has at least considered that. I've seen it in their water committee
Yeah.
minutes.
To answer your question, the Water District, at one point in time, 3 years ago, was looking at that area. We had already looked at it, determined it wasn't really financially feasible, so we didn't even include it in the GSP, but they wanted to revisit it. And at that point in time, they also spent, I believe the budgeted number was $200,000 on the fault line data.
Are we expecting a proposal to come forward? Or is staff expecting or working on a proposal to come forward with regard to changing the GSP for a management area for a subbasin?
Yes. Yeah, we will come back with how we would propose to do that and get more feedback on that.
Okay.
If there's nothing more of that, I'll go on to climate change. I'll try not to go into too much detail on that. We basically used some climate change models that are out there, and there are a lot of them. And the general practice is not to rely on one of them, but to use a number of them to see what the various impacts are. We used sort of what's a medium emissions scenario. When we looked at it, we looked at used one of the models that assumed that greenhouse gas emission would peak around the year 2040 and then decline. And then we used one that assumed that they would continue to rise strongly through 2050 and then plateau around 2011. That's sort of the business as usual model. And what we use these for is the models could generate what the predicted changes in precipitation were and in temperature. And we go to the next slide. That's what the first bullet says. Let's go to the next slide. We basically adjusted the recharge and the ET, based on temperature, adjusted the ET in our model to try and look at a sort of a range of potential climate change impacts. Let's go to the next one. And these are some of the results that come out of it. Let's see. On the left, I have a little tiny version. That's sort of the on the left is sort of the average impacts on groundwater levels in the year 2070 due to climate change. And what it's showing you is the greens, I mean, under sort of an average scenario, we've got some increases over there on Brown Road, and you can see blues up there towards Rose Valley, which means groundwater levels have increased some. The middle one, I think, is a sort of a worst case climate change, and the dark brown up near Rose Valley means the water levels are much deeper or much lower compared to, and we're comparing these, I think, to our baseline run that we had done, which is the pumping we have right now. Most of the basin, it's, I think, 8 to 10 foot reduction in groundwater levels due to climate change. And then the one on the right is one of their cool but wet scenarios. And the greens means it was increasing by, I think, 0 to 2 feet over most of the basin. Again, the dark blue up in the north are greater increases, greater than 10-foot increases compared to our baseline. So we've got a range of, I've got one more. Let's go to the next one. And this is showing just a couple of the other scenarios. Again, sort of an average under one of the other modeling assumptions and a warm dry under one of the other sets of modeling assumptions. But as you can see, there's sort of a range of potential impacts. I'm not aware that, you know, everyone's gathered around one of these models and said, yeah, this is the one that's going to work. So we are simply in the GSP going to say, look, there's some things, that climate change scenarios where we might actually benefit with higher groundwater levels, and we might get some more recharge. But there's some scenarios where we could see some reduced recharges. We're going to have to, in our plan, it's supposed to be, our GSP is supposed to be an adaptive plan. We're going to have to watch this as we go in the future, see if there's any other adjustments we need to make in our plan. At this point, we don't see anything we would propose to change in our implementation, out to the year 2040 at least, in response to climate change at this point. And that concludes that. I'd be glad to answer any questions on that modeling.
Any questions from the board?
I have one question. Jeff, could you go back and what was the total usage in you had 2040 through 2070, I believe, on that chart, correct?
Those were looking at groundwater levels in 2070, and it was the difference between our baseline modeling, sort of using historic hydrology, and the adjusted hydrology using these climate change changes.
But I wanted to see your actual pumping numbers, though. Could you go back to those real quick for me? I believe you had around 9,500 was our expected pumping with the plan. Is that correct?
No, that was current domestic pumping. I don't have a number in here for what the pumping is under the baseline. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have that right.
Well, I thought there was one that showed 9,500 plus 3,000 or so with evaporation. Is that right?
There was a slide that showed that. That was
Let me see if I
a
can.
discussion of the contingency plan. That was about slide.
I see it's not in this.
Yeah, there it is. That middle sub-bullet there.
Okay, so I just want to use this as a reference. So that's about our usage in 2040, is that correct? And then you were saying with
No.
ag being gone?
No, and that was a different discussion. This is our recent current 22 to 2023 domestic pumping only.
Okay. I'm trying to find the chart that had when you mentioned the ag pumping and where we were going to be on that plan.
Sorry, I'm trying to look back.
Yeah. I'm not saying it. It's okay. I'll look for it and I'll find it next time and we'll discuss
Okay.
it. No problem.
Any other questions or comments?
Oops. No.
Okay, not seeing any. Thanks, Jeff. We'll go to public comment.
Again, Joshua Nugent, Mojave Pistachios. Just some small clarifications. I was trying to understand all this, reading it last night. And I think you answered my question. Adaptive management was one of my questions, does the GSP have that written in? So in case one of the models showed, either it was drier or wetter, that would be, I'm assuming it's a 5-year deadlines, that would be when changes would be made if there were to be changes made to the GSP to reflect either a wetter or drier period. That's kind of what our adaptive would be if I'm understanding that right. And then my question really more for the technical guy, since you're here, is on the climate change model, there's both a change in precipitation, but also I call it like a change in the quality of our precipitation. Like maybe we get it more in like a big storm versus little slugs or something like that. Does that really matter in an overall model trend like this, or is that kind of getting too? Sorry, so that's just a quick question.
That's an interesting question. In some basins, that would make a huge difference where, we get rivers that flow through the basin and they recharge as they flow through the basin. We don't have that here. We have mountain front recharge. I'm not sure if we know how that impacts mountain front recharge, but I'd have to ask people like DRI and others about that.
Thank you. Next comment?
Hello, I'm Don Decker. Actually, for much of what I have to say here to start with anyway, I'm Dr. Don Decker. I'm your last TAC member still functioning. I've assumed from the start that we were all, that is Stetson and the other contributors to our reports and so on, are all trying to create and work with the best information available. And I've worked on that exact principle myself, regardless of where it is heading. I've got a couple of comments. The EP1, which is the well that was drilled in the El Paso Basin, it's 1,500 feet, although only about 1,000 feet actually now have multiple well, piezometers in them. The well was allowed to basically cave in for the lower 500 feet as a result of the driller getting too tired on the job and leaving. So the well schematic that you've got, Jeff, in your report, shows a fair amount of complexity, especially with depth. Actually, the cuttings that were brought up show a well that is fine clay and fine silt, virtually the entire depth, to the entire depth of 1,500 feet. And the drilling was actually fairly hard drilling, even though it's fine sedimentary material, because it was so dense. And what we were looking at there, when you're there on the ground and are looking around, it's very level for miles in various directions, or at least a mile. It's the El Paso Basin playa. Now it's the Pleistocene lake that was in that basin. And the significance of that is that the entire central part of the basin is a lot more clay than you might otherwise assume, and the amount of water in storage is not all that great as a result. It's exactly the same problem we have with our main basin here and the huge amount of clay that's associated with the playa clay formation. The clay that's in El Paso is grayish green, and as it dries out, the chlorophyll, the greenish color, disappears. So the one last thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is the 832 number for domestic well owners. This number is too small by a factor of about 2. And I'm saying that for a person who has actually done a lot of surveying, going around the basin and actually looking at what people are doing and calculating water use based on their external planting. The 832 number is actually the number of private domestic wells. Coincidental, right? It's just a number that was convenient to pull out of the hat. The reason that it's off by a factor of 2 is that a lot of the wells are shared by 4-way or maybe even a little larger. And so with 832, if everybody that was receiving that water had a little less than an acre foot, you'd have 832, but there's more like 1,400 or 1,500 houses that are actually hooked up, and the water consumption is correspondingly greater. They're all using water, even though it's only coming from 832 wells. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public like to comment on this item? Okay, not seeing any, we'll go to the phones. Go ahead, caller.
Hello, this is Renee Westelusk. I wanted to know for sure, are you absolutely sure where the outflow of the El Paso Basin is going? Is majority or all of it actually going into our main basin? That's my first question. And then Mr. Helsley gave an example of, I think, pumping 500 gallons per minute if some pumping was moved into the El Paso Basin. Could this affect not just our basin, but the basin that is south and west of us? I believe it's the Fremont Valley Basin. Correct me if I'm wrong. I have deep reservations, or I oppose pumping out of the El Paso because I think eventually, and maybe you can correct me, but if you keep pumping at 500 gallons per minute endlessly just to move some pumping from the main basin, wouldn't you eventually dry out the whole El Paso Basin? Those are my questions.
Okay, thanks, Renee. We'll see if Jeff can get some responses.
Yes, we do believe that the water that's going into the El Paso Basin is ultimately making it into the main part of the basin. The groundwater levels are so much lower in the main part of the basin that it's the gradient across there is drawing the water over there. We don't believe there's any water flowing from the El Paso into the Fremont, or at least nothing significant. I think what our modeling showed is if we do pump in the El Paso, we do take a lot of groundwater out of storage there and do greatly reduce the groundwater levels. Whether we would ultimately dry it up is, I don't know, kind of a layman's term, I think.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other callers? Okay. Not seeing any. We will go to the Water Resource Manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Steve. I want to verify you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great, because I'm kind of a bad connection. I'm going to try to move it along pretty rapidly, if that's okay, because you've been here a long time, and I know people have places to go. A couple of things. Some of this presentation that Jeff just provided for the GSP periodic evaluation is fresh off the press. Some of it I haven't even seen or evaluated yet, and I just wanted to tell Jeff, that was a great job. That periodic evaluation is coming along very well, and we're on track. So I just thought it was a great presentation. Thank you, Jeff. That was great. I want to remind people, we're talking about the El Paso. It was a big topic. El Paso Basin flow into the main basin, into the main part of the basin of Indian Wells Basin, was included in the Sustainable Yield 7650. The inflow there participated in that 7650. So wherever we do the impacts, it's going to be affected, which is what Jeff certainly showed. Okay, so I'm going to walk through pretty quickly the Water Resource Manager report. We start with the grant funding update for the implementation grant, which is the pipeline stuff we're working on. We've got 2 invoices, 7 and 8, both of them over $500,000, totaling about 1.1 total. They've been approved. We're just waiting payment. So we're going to get some money coming in. Things are moving well on the rotation between DWR, at least better than it has in the past. The next was the Urban Community Drought Relief Program. That's a consolidation grant. I always call it a consolidation grant because it makes more sense. That's what we're looking at it for. I wanted to respond to Director Griffin real quickly. Director Griffin, we are very aware of the issues out at Inyo and very aware that you guys at the Water District have, to whatever extent you guys are pulled into that. We've kept in touch. We've been trying to stay involved, at least in touch with what was going on there. But it looks like that's where it's headed. There's big issues there. Absolutely. When we get to the next phase, We are working very hard on the Rademacher well and the consolidation for Rademacher Phase 1 and Phase 2. As soon as we get on track, we made a lot of progress today. We will be looking at the more regional study that was talked about today to determine where the other priority consolidations need to take place. We'll get those evaluated, we'll get a package put together with the primary purpose, everyone, the primary purpose is to put that together, work with Mr. McKinney, who's done a fantastic job for you folks, work with Mr. McKinney to go out and get some more funding. We need more funding to actually implement consolidation. So we're going to use part of the funding we have to find out where we need consolidations and where we can get more funding. So that's part of our next step. And annual current is a part of that discussion. So I wanted to assure Director Griffin, we will be looking at that. On the GSP implementation, I go over this very quickly. It's all in the report. We've got the design services. There's a lot going on at the design level. You're going to see almost 2 pages, page and a half of details of things that have happened since the last meeting. A lot of work been done. And as a reminder, we didn't give much of a report at the last meeting. We got tied up in closed session, but there is a lot going on. It's all listed there. And as always, at the end of the section on design work, we talk about milestones. The key milestone is 90% design submittal. That's 90% complete, due early 2025. So we're on track to get the plans and specs, the package, ready to go for effectively final review. For the environmental services, we give the list of what we've been working on. There's a list of next milestones at the very bottom. For the right-of-way services, we also list where we're at and what the next plan, what the next milestone is, which is effectively a final right-of-way acquisition plan. Those are coming up. DWR submittals, some important stuff. Due January 31st, 2025 is our grant completion reports. February 2025, we're looking at meeting and agenda materials for coordination with AVAC on the pipeline, the water supply. March 31st, a lot of stuff coming up in March. Meeting agendas and materials for design coordination. These are DWR. Design specifications drafts, CEQA documentation, NEPA documentation, copies of permits, and our final grant completion report. This is the finish of the IP grant, is due April 30th, 2025. So we're pulling all this stuff together, a lot of work being done. Corps of Engineers, we've coordinated with the Corps where they can provide assistance. We are working right now on agreement with the Corps. I believe it's in the Corps' hands to execute an agreement. There's a section here on the shallow well mitigation problem that shows where we are. One of them is Rademacher. Jeff gave a great report on Rademacher, where we're at. I tried to describe some of the other stuff we're doing, but that's what's going on there. Jeff provided a very good, excellent report on where we're at with the periodic evaluations. We do provide a briefing in this water resources manager report. In addition to that, we provide a schedule of draft releases and a progress schedule that shows when things are coming up. So that's provided in the report. Miscellaneous items, real quick. A lot of data collection completed. We completed in the fall. So there's a list of the data work, field work that's been going on over the last several months. It's in the report. The GSP model configuration management plan, Jeff pretty well covered that with the technical group and the modeling results that have come in. Some very interesting stuff. We talk about the model runs. Jeff already ran through all of those. There is some discussion about subflow from Rose Valley. We did provide a technical memorandum to the TAC, which is Dr. Dagger did report. He's pretty much our TAC advisory council right now. But on the LADWP releases, we provided that, and I believe we've gotten some comments back from Don, but we've looked at that. In addition to that, we are still working on pulling together documentation with the Navy in regard to the Navy coastal funds and a second monitoring well that we are planning to drill in the Rose Valley. I think that's it for my report. I tried to do as quickly as I could, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions or comments from the board?
Excuse me, if I could add one thing?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yep. On the imported water pipeline, Provost and Pritchard, since our last meeting, has submitted the 60% design drawings for the pipeline, the pump stations, and the whole thing. So we're reviewing that right now. As Steve said, our next big goal will be the 90%, but we've got the 60% design in hand.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Hi, Steve. This is Helena, also with Stetson Engineers. One thing to add under the periodic evaluation, our 90-day notice to the city and the county should be going out this week.
Yes, that's publication, notification on the GSP, correct. That's good, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from the public on the Water Resource Manager's report? Okay, seeing none in the room, we'll go to the phones. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, this is Renee Westelusk. I just wanted to know, in the schedule for the draft completion of the periodic evaluation being released, you say November 2024. Is this going to be reviewed by the TAC and the PAC? Are there plans for that, or will they not be involved?
It is going to be put out for public review. We definitely have sent it to members of the TAC. I'm not sure if we'll hold a meeting on the chapters themselves. We may have TAC meetings on some of the subjects, the specific, subjects that are going to be addressed in the periodic evaluation.
So it'll just be released sometime in November to the public, and we can see it on the...
Yeah, we'll be getting some of the chapters out this month, and then the comprehensive document in November.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the General Manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your packet, you have the financial statements for September, and you can review those at your leisure. Let me know if you have any questions. Also, just a couple of notes there. Normally in October, we would bring the draft budget to you for the coming calendar year, and we agreed among staff and council to push that to November because we were waiting for some updates and scheduling on some litigation matters, because we wanted to be able to have an accurate as possible estimate of our litigation costs for our budget figures. So we'll be bringing the budget to you next month. Also, I think I don't know that we've had a chance to talk about it at our board meetings yet, maybe because we had, we had such a short time last month, but seeing some emails moving around, but I don't know that we've been able to announce it publicly beyond a news release. So that was $2.79 million that we've received from US EPA through their new resiliency and sustainability program, and that money is going to help us with any additional costs we're going to have towards design and planning costs for the pipeline project. Let's see. Additionally, as far as the C&E plan update, appreciated Judy Decker's remarks earlier in the meeting. See if we can't start arranging some speaking engagements as they're feasible. But more importantly, I think we are resuming working on our website and the content in particular. So we'll be looking to, I think, maybe hire some professionals to help us compile and get the content posted on our website. As far as educating the community on some of these issues, it sounds like there's a lot of misinformation. So we're looking forward to having a lot more facts and FAQs, fact sheets, things like that available on our website. Next item is our Capital Core report. I know they've been super busy working on WRDA and some other things, so let me ask Michael McKinney to to go ahead and jump in here.
Sure, Carol, thank you very much. During September, informal meetings with members of the conference committee took place regarding WRDA, and various lobbying actions took place at that time. Also, the final actions with the California legislature, they are now fully out of session, have taken place. So we have put to bed the 2023-2024 session and are gearing up for December introductions of the 25-26 California legislative session, as well as the lame duck congressional session that will begin sometime after the election in November. Beyond that, I can just answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay, not seeing any.
Okay, and finally, Mr. Chairman, the last item there under my report is the amendment to the Joint Powers Agreement to modify the board member alternate appointments. And I don't believe we've had any movement on this yet. I guess if any of the member agencies have an update for us, this would be a great time to hear it. But I think we're still waiting for these items to come up on board agendas.
Okay.
On that note, Inyo County fully supports that, and my apologies for not having that on an agenda yet. I think it would help, and maybe all the agencies, if you sent a draft, the actual agreement itself that you would like us to sign, and we could just put that on the agenda. That might facilitate getting that moving more quickly than otherwise.
And we can help with that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
And that's it for me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, any members of the public that would like to comment on the general manager's report?
Don Decker again. You know, I can understand why the board here would benefit from, would like to have an alternate member to stand in. However, that brings up, or it brings forth an issue that's been brought to this board many times, and that is, as a JPA, we have the population at large has no voice in your election. You're elected for some other purpose. And if you've got another party that perhaps is a staff member, not even elected, it takes the whole thing a step even further away from representation. And I think you need to think about that very carefully. You've been criticized, I think, to a fair extent unjustly, but it's a criticism that comes from the public not understanding what you're trying to do and what the benefits are. But this is not going to help you.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. And just to respond to that, at least from my point of view, I think the benefit would be, for example, in my situation, there have been, well, it might not be public here, but I've got a baby on the way. My wife's pregnant next month. If something were to happen, my alternate is a District 2 county supervisor, and that seat's not filled right now. So just having that option available, not necessarily having a full-time representative on this board, but just to ensure that whatever important business of the board can still get done, and having that option available, I think is kind of the rationale behind that. But I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. Any other members of the public that would like to comment? Okay, seeing none, we will go ahead and adjourn until our next meeting, November 13th, 2024.